I believe it started when I was around 6 years old. My parents often had friends over in the house. I didn't know they were polyamorous OFC. One day I was outside playing, got hurt, and when I ran inside caught my parents making out with some random guy. They told me they have other adults that they love and it's a completely normal thing. Me being a child just accepted that. They gave up being secretive and their partners would constantly be around, even joining on outings. I remember that on my 10th birthday they invited 3 of their partners, one of who I'd never seen before. And for the rest of the day my parents just withdrew from my party and hung out with them. I never saw them doing anything explicit again, but they would kiss their partners, hug them, make flirty comments. Something that would be normal between parents, but with many more people. Sometimes I came home from school and my parents were gone and there was some random adult in our house. Some of them seemed surprised that my parents even had a child. I always hated it, but since my parents had told me this was normal, I assumed many adults probably did similar things and that it's just an adult thing all kids hate. Later they had less partners and eventually seemed to stop. Not that I'd know for sure. I moved out with 17. I didn't think about it anymore. A year ago I started therapy, other reasons. As usual the topic of my upbringing came up and it brought back many feelings I wasn't aware of. I realized that although my parents were always good to me, I had never really felt close to any of them and still have a lot of resentment, that they made me feel like I had to compete for my parents' attention with random strangers. A while ago, I visited them and they told me they are going to take part in a documentary about polyamorous families, and that the producers would like to include interviews with the children. So they would love if I could agree and tell everyone that polyamory doesn't mess kids up. All my resentment bubbled up and I said that I cannot agree because I would not be able to say anything positive. My parents looked shocked. I had never brought this up before, and asked why, and I unloaded all that I always felt pushed aside. We barely had any family time without strangers intruding. It turned into an argument and I became loud and yelled that the truth is it did me up and they shouldn't have had a child. My mother cried and my father said I should probably leave. So I left and was shaken up for the rest of the week, but also felt regret because I've never made my mom cry before. Later my father sent me a message that was like, "We are sorry you feel that way. Can we have a calm discussion about this soon?" Even though I tried to, it's like I can't reply. This argument brought something very emotional up in me. I am a 16-year-old female. I used to have a good relationship with my mother. That has since crashed and burned since she dated and married my stepdad, Gary, 6 years ago. Gary treats his son Ian, 19 male, like he's the center of the universe and expects my mother to as well, so she does. Anything Ian wants, Ian gets, and that usually comes at the expense of me. Ian wanted my room when they moved it. I was forced to go to another room to make the transition easier for everyone. Ian wanted a car for his 16th birthday. I didn't get braces for another year. Ian wanted to go on an expensive trip for spring break. I had to give up volleyball to make it happen. Ian wanted to have his side of the family over. I was expected to find somewhere else to be, since I wasn't family. My mother just went along with all of this and acted like it shouldn't affect me at all. My dad was overseas for a long time, and we used to FaceTime and he was so upset by what he was hearing. He's home now and he's offering to have me come live with him. I'm not seeing a reason not to go, and so I told my mom I wanted to go live with my dad. She predictably freaked out and asked why I'd want to do that and said that we had such a good relationship. She didn't understand how this came so out of the blue. I told her that we haven't had a good relationship since she blindly decided to follow Gary's lead and give Ian anything he wanted, and it always came at my expense. My mom tried to argue, so I said I also wanted to leave because she let them kick me out of my own house because I wasn't family. So I was going to go live with someone who was. My mom started crying and said she wouldn't let me go. So I told her that my dad was willing to go to court over it and I was old enough to be able to say where I wanted to be. She's been a crying mess since I told her, and Gary is being a jackass about how awful I'm being. He was. ING at me about how terribly I'm treating them and how I'm not thinking about them at all. I asked why should I. He never thought of me when he was taking things from me to give to his kid. I said, let's face facts here, you don't care about me, what you care about is losing the child support you spend on your son. He sort of went slack-jawed and I walked off. My dad said my mom called and threatened to take him to court, so he said he'd see her there. Now she's panicking because she realized he is planning on taking her to court over this. Mom and Gary of course think I'm the asshole for making things hard for everyone. But my dad and grandparents say to leave and never look back. My sister and I lost our dad a year ago. He was my only parent, Mom was never in mine or my sister's life. Dad left money, inheritance, for me and sister, and she used her inheritance to get new cars and renovate her house. I live with my aunt right now cause my brother-in-law didn't let me stay with my sister. I'm planning on using my inheritance money to pay for college tuition. I've always wanted to be doctor but haven't decided which branch yet. My sister and I haven't been close. It started after she got married to her chronically ill husband who was allowed to make backhanded comments about dad and mock his illness, and make a scene at his funeral. Only because he's ill and shouldn't be held accountable for his behavior. I've distanced myself, but my sister kept visiting a lot lately venting about my brother-in-law's condition. He's been in and out the hospital for heart problems and in need for a surgery. She brought up my inheritance money several times but I end up cutting the conversation. She then straight up asked if I could help pay for her husband's surgery and she'd pay back in less than a year. I felt uneasy cause if I give her money from my inheritance, which is a large amount, then there's no guarantee she'll pay back before it's time to apply for college. I'm taking a year gap but I know my sister can't pay back that much and I felt I was risking my future. I refused to help and she had a meltdown at my aunt's house calling me heartless, cruel with no empathy. She said that her husband's health should be a priority and I needed to help because education is nothing compared to someone's health, and asked if I'd be happy to see her as a widow and my nephew with no father. My aunt suggested others pay but most of them cut my sister and her husband off. I argued that her husband's poor health isn't my fault after she kept blaming and guilt-tripping me. She kept crying and although my aunt decided to stay out of it, she said that I should be prepared for permanent damage in my relationship with my sister if I don't help her now. She's been sending texts and pictures of her family telling me this is what I was saying no to. A happy, healthy family with a healthy husband and father. I cried and felt like I was being selfish, not good aunt and sister. I asked my friend and he said let them sell the cars and all the luxurious stuff they bought to afford the surgery and warned me, if I give them money I'll never get it back and may not be able to go to medical school. I got my son a 7K motorcycle for his 18th birthday this past June. My son is obsessed with automobile and loves motorcycles. In his room he has plenty of models and posters of motorcycles of all types. His bio dad passed away when he was just 12, now I'm married to my current husband and he has kids of his own. My husband has always been against my son's interest in motorcycles. He thinks I'm encouraging him to be reckless, distracting him from school and by extension his future, and spoiling him and blowing away money by spending 7K on a motorcycle. This caused some tension between him and my son, so I told him to stop complaining about it. Around 2 weeks ago, my son's motorcycle went missing. We opened a police report but nothing came out of it. It just disappeared. My husband had a smirk on his face the entire time, just walking around saying, "I told you so. You just wasted your money." This was unbearable to hear, to be quite honest. My mother-in-law visited few days ago. She was talking about the other house my husband owns and mentioned seeing a motorcycle. One that's similar to the one that we lost in my husband's carriage while she was cleaning it. She goes to clean that house weekly even though it's empty. My husband plans on giving it to his kids as inheritance. I was puzzled. I asked if she was certain, but she showed me a photo she took of it which confirmed that it was indeed my son's motorcycle. I immediately rushed to call my husband and confront him about it. He admitted that he took and hid the motorcycle in his garage as a last resort after me and his stepson kept brushing him and his thoughts off about the 7K being spent on something unnecessary and that could cause issues. I blew up at him demanding he return it. He refused and told me he had been considering selling it and giving the money back to me so I could use it wisely this time. I told him I was serious and that I'd call the police. He literally said, "This is a family matter and cops can't do shit about it." I had enough. I called the cops soon as I ended the call with him. The motorcycle was found and returned. But my husband had to be taken in since there was an open file about the motorcycles going missing. He was let go eventually, but he was livid with me. He came home yelling about how awful what I did was and how crazy my behavior was. I refused to engage in the argument, but he told his entire family about it and they judged me for calling the police on my own husband, even though I already asked him to return it. He said he was just looking out for my son and that one day we'll realize that he was right, but only when it's too late. My son isn't speaking to me or my husband. I feel horrible about the whole situation and am starting to think I handled this the wrong way.